A man could doubt his own children, but a woman had to prove they were his. Think about that for a second. In the ancient world, the one person who knew the truth for certain was the one forced to prove it, the mother. She carried the child. She felt it move. She gave it life with her own body. She had no doubt at all. And yet, her word meant nothing. She had to convince a husband, a family, a whole society, with no test, no science, no proof that anyone would accept. How do you prove something that cannot be proven? That was the impossible burden placed on ancient women, and the way they survived it is stranger and darker than almost anyone imagines. Let's start with the cruel center of it all. A mother always knows her child is hers. That is the one certainty in all of human reproduction. But fatherhood? Fatherhood was a guess, a hope, a leap of faith taken by men who had everything to lose. And here is the trap. Because the man could never be sure, the woman was forced to make him sure. The doubt was his, but the burden was hers. She had to spend her whole life proving a thing she could not prove to a man who could never be satisfied. Let that sink in. So how did she do it? How did an ancient woman with no rights of her own convince the world that her child belonged to one man? The answer is not what you'd expect, because she didn't prove it with evidence. She proved it with her entire life. Every choice, every movement, every hour of every day became part of the proof. Her proof was not a single moment. Her proof was a lifetime of being watched. But wait, let's go deeper. The first kind of proof was visibility. A pregnancy could not be hidden. The growing body, the slowing steps, the months that everyone could count. In a small ancient community, nothing was private. Neighbors watched. Relatives whispered. The whole village kept the calendar in their minds. When a child was born, people already knew the timing. They knew when the husband was home. They knew when he was away. And they did the math. A child born too early or too late became a question that followed a woman for life. Think about that pressure. Even the timing of birth could become an accusation. The second kind of proof was the witness. When an ancient woman gave birth, she was rarely alone. Other women were there, midwives, mothers, sisters, neighbors. The birth itself was public, and those women became living proof. They could swear that the child came from her body, in that house, on that night. This mattered enormously, because one fear haunted ancient families more than almost any other: the fear of a swapped child. A false heir slipped into the cradle, a stranger's baby raised as your own. So the witnesses watched the birth to guarantee the child was truly hers. But notice the strangeness here. They could prove the child came from the mother. They could never prove who the father was. The witnesses solved one mystery and left the deeper one untouched. Let that sink in. The third kind of proof was seclusion. And this one is the heart of it. If a woman was never alone with another man, then doubt had nowhere to grow. So the system reached backward in time. Her proof did not begin at birth. It began years earlier. A girl was guarded. A bride was watched. A wife was kept close to home. Walls, courtyards, chaperones, closed doors. Every barrier was a kind of evidence. It said, no other man could have reached her, so the child must be his. Do you see the logic? She did not prove the child was her husband's. She proved that no one else was possible. Her innocence was built from her isolation, and that is a terrible way to live. The fourth kind of proof was reputation, maybe the most powerful of all. In the ancient world, a woman's good name was a kind of currency. If she was known as faithful, as modest, as obedient, then her child was believed. But if a single rumor touched her, just a whisper, just a glance, the proof collapsed. Think about how fragile that is. A lifetime of faithfulness could be erased by gossip, by an enemy, by a jealous neighbor, by a man she rejected. Her reputation was her shield, but it was a shield made of other people's opinions. And opinions can be poisoned. But wait, there's one more layer, the most important of all, because in the end, none of these proofs decided anything. Not the timing, not the witnesses, not the seclusion, not the reputation. There was one moment that mattered more than all of them combined, the moment of acknowledgement. In many ancient societies, a child was not truly accepted at birth. The child had to be recognized by the father. In ancient Rome, for example, the custom was striking. The newborn was placed on the ground, and everyone waited. If the father lifted the child up, the child was his, accepted, named, given a future. If he turned away, the child had nothing. Think about that. The mother could give birth. She could be faithful, she could be innocent, but the final proof was not in her hands at all. It was in his. A single gesture decided everything. And this is the truth that hides beneath the whole story. An ancient woman could never truly prove a child was her husband's. Not really, not with certainty, because no such proof existed for anyone, anywhere, for thousands of years. So what she was really doing was something else. She was not proving the truth. She was earning belief. The witnesses, the seclusion, the reputation, the acknowledgement. None of it was evidence. All of it was trust. The entire system ran on trust in a world that gave women no power to demand it. Let that sink in. She was asked to prove the unprovable and judged on whether men chose to believe her. And that is why this matters so much. Because when proof is impossible, power decides the truth. If the husband wanted to believe, the child was his. If the husband wanted to doubt, no amount of proof could save her. Her innocence was real, but her safety depended entirely on his choice. This is the quiet horror of it. A faithful woman and an unfaithful woman could face the exact same suspicion, because the suspicion was never about the facts. It was about him, his fear, his pride, his need to be certain. And in that gap between truth and proof, countless women lived their entire lives, watched, doubted, asked to prove what could not be proven, carrying a burden that was never really theirs to carry. So step back now and see the whole shape of it. For most of human history, the deepest question in any family had no answer. Whose child is this? The man could not know. The science did not exist. So instead of accepting the doubt, societies handed it to women. Prove yourself, guard yourself, watch yourself forever. And women did, through walls and witnesses, through silence and reputation, through 1,000 small sacrifices nobody ever thanked them for. They held entire family lines together, with nothing but their own faithfulness and the fragile hope of being believed. That is not weakness. That is endurance, on a scale we rarely imagine. And maybe that's the part that stays with you. We think of proof as something modern, a test, a result, a simple answer. But for almost all of human history, there was no test. There was only a woman standing inside her own truth, asking the world to trust her, and a man deciding whether it would. The science finally came. The certainty finally arrived. But it came thousands of years too late for all the women who lived and died, proving what they already knew to people who refused to simply believe them. So the next time you hear someone say, "Prove it," remember those women, Remember that for most of human history, the people who carried the truth were the ones forced to defend it, and the ones who doubted held all the power. That gap between what is true and what is believed is one of the oldest wounds in the human story, and we are only just beginning to heal it.